Did you see Keep Sweet, Pray, Obey? If you haven't, just a warning, there are lots of triggers for essay and then also just for all types of spiritual abuse, trauma. I'm Dr. Patrice, licensed psychologist, and I have been trained to treat spiritual abuse. And I like to watch different documentaries, different things that talk about these topics, because sometimes it comes up with my clients. And then also I like to share this education with you here on my channel. This is education only. And if watching those shows, if listening to this, if it is a bit triggering, please reach out to the resources that are in the comments. Towards the end of Keep Sweet, Pray, and Obey, I actually had to fast forward through certain parts. During the very last episode, they play an audio that I just could not listen to because there is a such thing as secondary trauma. So just watching something else that someone has went through that is traumatic, that you know is a real life event, there are times that you might have to step back and protect your own mental health for, yes, I do have the energy to watch this, or no, I don't. I think that Keep Sweet, Pray, and Obey really showed that within the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, the FLDS group, that specific one that was run by those specific leaders, it had cult-like thoughts. And they didn't use the word cult, and that was interesting. I don't believe that was ever used throughout the entire thing, but you were pretty much cut off from your family. You were cut off from the world. You were cut off from everything else. And really it was their goal to have this sacred community. And the fact that one person got to choose who would marry who, and that somebody could say, I don't want to be with this person, that somebody underage could say, I don't want to be with this person, and those things be ignored, it was very difficult to watch at times. And yet it was very interesting because you know these are real stories. And I really commend each and every survivor that came and spoke up during the documentary, just showing their faces. And I'm sure they're doing this to hopefully, for anybody else that leaves that community, for anybody else that's in a group that is overly controlling, that's controlling exactly what you think and what you believe, that can open the door to spiritual abuse. Spiritual abuse is defined as any attempt to exert power and control over an individual using religion, faith, or beliefs. And there were clear examples of this throughout both documentaries, but especially the Keep Sweet one. That one it had clear examples of people being kicked out of the community for seemingly no reason. It was just kind of God told me, and the person was kicked out of the faith. And from my own personal belief, I think religion and faith can be a source of comfort. It can also be a source of great pain. And in this situation, religion was used, people's beliefs were used to control them. And I remember the one 14 or 15-year-old that was forced to marry, and she's speaking now as an adult, saying that if she didn't go along with this marriage that she didn't want, feeling like she was not only jeopardizing her own salvation, but also the salvation of her family. And how would her family be viewed? Would her mother be viewed negatively because her daughter was rebelling against the religion? And it is so problematic. Within that system, patriarchy and misogyny and capitalism thrived in that community. And it was this, men are everything and women are just there to give children, and they're just supposed to be there. And they were really devalued, and they were not protected. And I do believe that the people that believed this, they thought they were doing their best. And that's where sometimes we can have the best of intentions, but what was the impact? So I don't think the people that truly believe that this was what God was telling them. This was what they believed when they were in it. I think they thought they were doing what was best. And they honestly thought this is what their higher being was telling their leader to do, without seeing the flawed nature of their leader. And I have very strong thoughts about any person that is put up on this pedestal as though they can't fail. Any leader that doesn't have any authority over them. There's nobody else that can check them. They're able to just kind of do whatever they want to do. They have all power. I think it is important to note that spiritual abuse is not limited to one specific religion or denomination. It can occur in any group. But if leaders are held on this pedestal and people are forced to believe and they're not encouraged to think, you're not able to ask questions, you're not able to disagree, to have any other way of thinking. This is the only way that everybody in the entire group has to think about everything. I think that becomes incredibly problematic, and it gives that one person so much power. And power can corrupt, and unchecked power can be extremely dangerous. And that's what you saw within this documentary. And in talking about healing spiritual abuse, there is so much power in speaking out about it. And recently I saw a video where a woman came out and spoke out about abuse that she had experienced by the person who was still the pastor of the church when she was younger, and some of the backlash that she got within the ministry. I think people have to be careful when we put leaders up on this pedestal as though they can do no harm and as though they are almost a god themselves. And within FLDS, they really did view their, I forget the word, what the person was called, but that highest person as a, let me look it up, the prophet, that Warren Jeffs as the prophet, that he was able to control the money. So there is a type of spiritual abuse that is financial, where you are forced to give what you do not have. It was interesting to hear people talk about they were barely meeting their own needs for their family, and yet they were saying, okay, you have to get $1,000 by the end of the week, or you have to get this amount of money. And little did they know, when Warren Jeffs was on the run at the end, that money was being used to finance a very lavish lifestyle. The fact that people didn't own their own property, that the church owned all of their property, the fact that people didn't own their own business, all of those things are kind of warning signs, in my opinion, speaking as somebody that is not within that religion, because I think what that does is that gives the church incredible power. And churches still operate under the same systems, the same patriarchy, the same capitalism, the same systems that operate in a secular setting, operate in a spiritual setting, if it goes unchecked. And people have to be honest about, okay, where is the money going? People didn't even know where their money was going. I do identify as a Christian. I attend a church where once a year we're able to look, okay, this is exactly how the money that was given was spent. People aren't encouraged to give what they don't have. It's only what you do have. And there's not special status given to people that give more, or you don't lose status if you give less. There's physical abuse that can occur within spiritual settings, and that is often happens with children, but it can happen with adults too if there's some type of punishment that's inflicted. Or what I see most often with spiritual abuse is financial, sexual, psychological, and social. And the psychological piece is that manipulation, the gaslighting, telling people that what they're feeling isn't accurate or isn't real, and that they're not true in their faith if they disagree with the leader. I've said it in different places, but the church I attend, our pastor always says, it's not my job to tell you what to think, it's to encourage you to think. Once again, extremely triggering video. It was a lot. it was very interesting because you keep thinking it can't get any worse, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. I haven't given any major spoilers, but there are things that are said, and I'm so glad. I don't know if Warren Jeffs hadn't gotten so greedy and built that separate community in Texas and fled Utah, I don't know if he would have been in jail. That Texas wasn't used to what he was doing, to the religion, and the community was a part of just kind of watching and taking pictures and keeping an idea and updating the authorities. And so being able to watch all of that as an outsider was just wow. And I try to have empathy for the people that are in that, for the people that believe, for the people that are caught up in the midst of it. I can't imagine being born into that community and this is all you know. This is what you think is normal. You don't know anything else. Those kids, you heard people talk about coming out of the community and not knowing any of the popular references because they didn't have TV, they didn't have regular news, not knowing a lot of the slang or other things, and being that sheltered for that long, just the impact that can have on a person. And yet that innate ability to survive, that innate ability of what's right and what's wrong still kicked in about something about this doesn't sound right. Something about this doesn't feel right. And for the people that had the courage to speak out and say something, and I don't think that the people that stay, that they don't have courage, I think they don't have the knowledge. I think they just don't see it. They think this is what's right and this is what's normal. And I think adding in the fact that within that religion, that they believe there's only a certain number of people that are going to go to the promised land. And in order to achieve the highest rank, you need to be able to portray yourself in a certain way. And Warren Jeffs, from what I saw, was incredibly good at manipulating people, about getting people to do exactly what he wanted them to do, which is a bit scary because the best people that don't become cult leaders, they understand the power that they have and the influence that they have, and they only use it for good, and they want to make sure that people have the choice. So I don't want to force anybody to subscribe to my channel. Now, I'm going to encourage it. I'm going to ask people to do those things, but I'm not going to force people to do these things. I'm not going to say that a person is, I'm not going to judge anybody for not subscribing or not following me. That's not a bad thing. And yet, I think within those communities, people will use the fact that people want to be a part of a group, and the fact that people want to be liked and they want to be seen, they will use that against them. And it was interesting that sometimes the fathers with a lot of daughters, they knew. And then the fact that those daughters are often married to only certain people, certain older guys within the community. A lot of the young men within the community ended up not being faithful, and I don't know, they ended up getting kicked out of the community, which at the time I'm sure they thought was the worst thing ever, and yet it might have been what protected them from kind of redoing a lot of those same cycles themselves. FLDS continues to have a population of about 4,000 according to what I saw online, and this is still an active religion. These are things that people still believe. My concern is that there's no choice. And I appreciate when there is choice in religion. And then shifting to a completely different documentary, also a bit triggering for LGBTQ community, Pray Away. That one was also just good to watch, especially as a therapist that works with the LGBTQ community, because people might have experienced programs like Exodus or the new name. I forget what the new name is. And so often, because of internalized homophobia or internalized transphobia, people often struggle and fight against what they feel and what they know. And to hear people that had tried with all their might to pray the gay away, and the fact that they narrowed it down to behavior versus a feeling or an identity, and really spoke against people having the identity, and they were able to call out some of the tactics that were used politically. Those things were just very interesting to sit back and watch, because I've seen these things happen, and these things continue to happen. For some reason in Florida, they're talking about banning children from drag shows. And I wonder, like, do you know what happens at a drag show? Like, it's not this, I don't know, like, I don't understand what's so wrong with it. What's so wrong? Why did we have to have this gendered society where everything is you're either this or this? Why can't we be more inclusive? And that's where I am. That's how I feel. With Pray the Gay Away, I think where the spiritual abuse comes in is where people are ostracized and kicked out if they do come out. And that's why when people ask, should I come out to my family, or how do I come out to my family, the first thing they have to assess is your family safe? And what do we do if they don't have a good reaction? Our goal, we hope that yes, they would have a good reaction, but some people don't and some people won't. And so how do you go about having those conversations if they don't go well? And for some people, they are not able to come out to their family. I've also heard it called bringing people in instead of coming out, bringing people into their identity. And I like both of those analogies, and whatever a client resonates with most, that's what we go with. But being able to talk about how faith can be used to really ostracize entire communities and make people feel bad about who they are. And for me personally, that doesn't go with love. That doesn't go with what I feel and with what I hope to share with others. And I am an affirming therapist, and because there's a difference between accepting and affirming. So an accepting person might still kind of say, like, love the sinner, hate the sin. And then an affirming person says, I love you, I see you, and I love you for exactly who you are. The one thing I do know is that conversion therapy, especially with children and teens, is incredibly harmful. It's also harmful with adults, especially when the person goes through it and they still have the same thoughts, the same feelings, because they often feel like they're not doing it well enough. They're not trying hard enough. And lots of people will have feelings of not wanting to be alive if they continue to have these thoughts and feelings. Suicide rates within the LGBTQ community, it can be so high. And if you're having those kinds of thoughts, here are some resources. Or if this triggers things in any way for you, please reach out. The whole narrative that if somebody does identify as LGBTQ, that it had to be because of abuse or a bad relationship with their opposite sex parent, all of that was just, and how the people that were talking about a lot of these things without having any knowledge of psychology, or even some of the psychologists that might have come along with it, but with the additional goal of writing books or building a curriculum, there being some financial incentive for them being involved with it. I personally believe conversion therapy is unethical, especially with children, especially if somebody comes to me and if my child is this and I don't want them to be, it's not my job to change people to something from who they are. And so I don't. And it was so interesting that when the one person that was a part of the Exodus program, that was the Pray the Gay Away program, when they heard the survivors talk about their story, that individual identified more with them than with the program. And I think it was because of that they likely came to the realization that they were being coerced into something that they didn't want, that they didn't really believe. and they were just trying to be a good Christian, which for people that have the intersection of faith, especially race, gender, sexual orientation, my heart really hurt for the people that had been through that program. And the reason why I use Pray Away along with talking about spiritual abuse is because a lot of people within the LGBTQ community feel as though they are not accepted as they are. And it's not a feel like that within many churches that are not accepting or affirming, they will experience some of the most hateful, some of the worst statements. And in some countries, it's actually illegal. And being able to find safety within your faith, if you do choose to believe, I think is incredibly important. So I'm a licensed psychologist, and conversion therapy typically does not work. There is an even more intense version that uses shock therapy, which they didn't really talk about. I learned that that was unethical when I was in graduate school, and that I'm so glad, because I did go to a Christian graduate school, but it was an accepting graduate school, not affirming, because they still had very strict rules for the school. I remember meeting with a gay Black man and him talking about feeling left not only within his religion, but also within his race. And so that's where that intersectionality can really come into play, that people can lose entire communities, and it can be extremely painful. People can get caught off by their family. And I saw, they didn't really talk about it, but there was one part where a woman is getting married to her wife, and the wedding planner is talking about bringing in something important from family. And I don't know if she ever did, because it seemed like that was a place of pain. That was a pain point. And I don't know if she was still accepted within her family. If somebody is LGBTQ and they identify with a particular religion, making sure to find at least an accepting church. Affirming is even better. And then if they need to find a therapist, finding an affirming therapist, somebody that they're going to be able to talk about these different parts of themselves, and they're going to help them work through whatever's coming up for them, if there is something specific coming up. If you saw those movies, let me know what you thought. Nothing too triggering, because once again, the comments are public. But if you do have questions for me that you'd like me to address in a follow-up video, you can post those down below as well. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.